ton of opportunities in their 29-25 loss to the Bucs in Week 14, and it perfectly sums up their disappointing 2023 season.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, covering the Falcons for many years, well over a decade, multiple decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. You may know me as Sirius Black. You may know me as Mr. Drew. I'm sure I got a bunch of other fun nicknames that I'm sure the chat is going crazy with. Go ahead and give me your best AKA. But of course, we appreciate all you guys that are hanging out in the chat, commiserating on this Falcons loss, as well as those of you that make this illustrious podcast your first listen, your first watch each and every day. Shout out to the everydayers, and especially, now that I'm not going to say the Falcons season is over, but, the season it's starting to wrap up with this loss. But if you want to continue to be an everydayer, by all means, do so by subscribing or following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So obviously you can tell by my somber tone that very disheartened from this loss, right? And I think this loss kind of perfectly summarizes the Falcons season, right? Where they had many opportunities today against the Bucs and they failed to take advantage of them. And that's the story of their season. They just blown out opportunity after opportunity. And in today's game, it was kind of when they got the safety midway through the second quarter, that was kind of the moment I was like, okay, they're going to lose today. And, they might make it a game at some point and make it interesting. And they did. But it was like, at that point, I kind of knew. And that came with a little less than 3 minutes to go in the second quarter, right before halftime. And the Falcons on their previous series had missed a field goal, the first of two missed field goal from Younghoe Koo in today's game, and failed that opportunity to sort of take a 10-10 lead. But they got to stop on defense. And you thought, okay, put in their 2-minute offense. They can go down the field, get points. Then they get the ball back at the beginning of the second half. They'll get more points. And so, this could easily go from a 10-10 game to a 24-10 game, or even if it went to a 16-10 game with the Falcons getting 2 field goals, that would have been something that would have been kind of the adrenaline shot that they needed in this sort of game. And so, of course, that didn't happen because on the opening snap of their second series, not on the second series, but in that, in that 2-minute drill, they run play action backed up in their end zone. Keith Smith whiffs on the block to Antoine Winfield, and he winds up stripping Desmond Ridder from behind after Ridder holds onto the ball a beat too late. Smith does recover the ball in the end zone, so it's not a defensive touchdown, but instead it's a safety. And that was kind of the moment for me, at least, where I kind of realized, okay, they're going to lose today. But again, they still had plenty of opportunities after that point to win this game, despite my pessimism, to kind of pull it out, right? Because they even got the ball back again before halftime with under a minute to go, and were able to drive down the field to get in the field goal range. And that's when Younghoe Koo missed his second field goal of the day, right? Both from 50-plus yards. Then you go in the third quarter where the Bucs and Falcons are basically just swapping 3 and outs in that quarter. The Bucs do put together a touchdown drive, on a sort of long punishing drive, methodical drive where they really kind of ran the ball down the Falcons' throats. And then wound up scoring on a 31-yard screen due to some, missed tackles or guys couldn't get off blocks and whatnot. And then in the fourth quarter, you get a big play from Bijan Robinson on a 33-yard jet sweep that sets up his 3-yard score, and that cuts the lead to 19-17 with 11 minutes to go in the game. You give up a field goal to the Bucs on the next drive, but then you respond with a touchdown drive of your own. And you take that 25-22 lead. Drake London makes a spectacular catch to set up that score on a 45-yard play. Besides Bijan's behind the back catch earlier this season, it's probably the best catch of a Falcon player all year long. And then Ridder finishes that drive with a 6-yard touchdown, beating Joe Tryon Shoyinka on a QB keeper to the corner. You get the 2-point conversion to Drake London. And so that gives you that 25-22 lead with about 3.5 minutes left in the game. And, I'm sitting there thinking, well, this feels like this is too much time left on the clock. And that proved to be true. But even then, the Falcons defense had a number of opportunities to get off the field. They could not on the ensuing drive. They had the Bucs on a 4th and 1 after a great play by Calais Campbell to get a stop on a 3rd and 1 run. But the Bucs convert. And then even on that conversion, they nearly coughed up the ball because Andre Smith was able to punch the ball out of Rachaad White's hands. Unfortunately, White was able to sort of recover it. Then you get another 3rd and 10 later in that drive, and Chris Godwin beats D. Alford and DeMarco Hellams for a 32-yard gain. And then a few plays later, K. Dotton puts the period at the end of the sentence, beating Richie Grant in the end zone for a touchdown with 31 seconds left. So, you look at all those missed opportunities the Falcons had, right? And I failed to mention how Desmond Ridder missed a wide open Bijan Robinson in the flat on the opening drive on a would-be touchdown. But that forced you to settle for 3 points instead of getting 7. Failed to mention on the second drive, Ridder throws an interception when the Falcons are backed up inside their own 10-yard line, which the Bucs then were able to quickly score points, a touchdown on. And so your offense kind of, with the safety and that touchdown off the turnover, kind of gift wraps 9 points of the Bucs in the first half. And then that missed throw in the red zone, that takes 4 points off the board. And then you have, your super reliable kicker, which, I think with Justin Tucker missing some kicks a couple of weeks ago, is the most accurate active kicker in the NFL, last I heard. He misses 2 field goals in this game. So, when you look at that, you say the Falcons offense probably should have scored at least 10 more points, and the Bucs probably shouldn't have scored, should have scored 9 less. And so if the Falcons were just a normal team that just took advantage of all the opportunities that they had, right? This should have easily been a 35-20 win, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. That's basically the story of the Falcons season. We all agree that this team has underachieved all year long. Whether you look at the 4-4 start as underachieving, I don't. And you look at, that should have been a 6-2 start, given some of those frustrating losses to like Washington and Tennessee. Or you're like me and you look at the 2 games under Taylor Heineke that were losses to Minnesota and Arizona, you say we probably would have won those games if Desmond Ridder had been the starter. But regardless of what side of the fence you're on in that regard, at the very least, this team is 2 wins underachieving, right? That instead of being 6-7 right now, they should be at least 8-5, if not better, at this point in time. But they're not. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, because they just can't take advantage of the opportunities they have. They have every opportunity to be 8-5 or 9-4 at this point in time, and they do the thing that we've talked about, is they keep shooting themselves in the foot. Right? That's the story of their season. So, with 4 games left to play, 4 winnable games left to play, the season's technically not over. We talked about this with Locked On Bucs co-host James Yarko, that the Falcons, losing this game, the Bucs technically hold the tiebreaker, I think, on common games at this point in time in the NFC South, with both teams having 6-7 records. But the Falcons have a slightly easier schedule over their last 4 than the Bucs. So theoretically, the Falcons still have a chance to dig themselves out of this hole. But, it's a deep enough hole where it's just like, I don't know what analogy I'm going to use, but, basically, the analogy I'll use the analogy I used on the postcast, right? And we talked about it, how, like, if you look at the season as a football game and 1 quarter left to go, it's the beginning of the 4th quarter now. And the Falcons just into the 3rd quarter, and they had an opportunity to take the lead. And they go down the field and they march down the field, and you're like, okay, well, they'll take this lead, they'll get the field goal, or they'll score a touchdown, and they'll take this lead, and they'll have this lead, i.e. control of their destiny down the stretch in the playoff race, right? If you're not following. And they failed, right? And rather than settling for the field goal, they throw an interception in the end zone. That's what it feels like. And it's like, it's still technically like maybe they're down a point, maybe it's a tie game or whatever going into the 4th quarter. So it's still winnable. It's a still winnable game, but they no longer sort of control their destiny is kind of the point. And the bitter taste that you get from going, the length of a field, going 70 yards down the field and then throwing an interception at the end of the drive is kind of what it feels like right now. So, speaking of, quarterbacks throwing interceptions, let's talk more about Desmond Ridder. And as I expected, the Falcons put this game on him to win, and he came up short. And that begs the question over whether or not this is going to be the last chance. That was what we saw on Sunday, the last chance for Desmond Ridder in Atlanta. So we'll break that down as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Now, good, bad, or in between, it is tough to root for your favorite team on an empty stomach. So order your faves with DoorDash, whether your team is winning, order something to celebrate, whether they're losing, order that pick-me-up. DoorDash has the unbeatable deals on everything you need for your watch party, or tailgate. All your favorite restaurants, stores, from retail to grocery, are all on the app so that you can be game day ready. So get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Subject to change, terms apply. That's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Don't forget to use that code LOCK23 for 50% off up to a $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Subject to change, terms apply. So continuing today's Locked On Falcons, we're going to talk more about Desmond Ridder in a second, but I do want to plug the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. If you want to get caught up on all the news around the nation, the world, across all the leagues, Locked On Sports Today is the first of its kind 24/7 streaming channel. So check it out, as well as the Locked On Sports Atlanta 24/7 streaming channel, so you can stay caught up on all the local headlines as well. So is Desmond Ridder done? Maybe. We'll see. I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer, but I'm leaning a certain way is kind of the answer to that question. Now, we talked leading up to this game that given the injuries that the Falcons were going to have on their offensive line, that they were likely to put this game on Desmond Ridder to win. And that proved to be true. Like, their game plan early on was, let's throw the ball sort of short, high percentage passes to try to get him into a rhythm and all that stuff. The run game was not that effective early in the game. They were at a 33% success rate on like 9 handoffs in the first half. And so I think when a lot of people look back at the box score and they see Ridder drop back, I think 45 times when you count scrambles as well, and the Falcons run the ball 24 times, they look at that as that's wrong. But that to me was not a surprise. That to me is what I expected to see in this game. And unlike other people, I don't see that as a negative, right? That's one of the beauties of why you listen to Locked On Falcons, because we here on Locked On Falcons, on Tuesday told you this was the game it was going to be, while everybody else is still sitting here, hours after the game on Sunday being like, I don't understand why the game was like this. And it's like, we told you that like 4 or 5 days ago that this was going to be the game. But so I don't have the criticism that I'm sure some of you guys have for Arthur Smith or his game plan or his play calling or whatever. Like that's whatever. This game to me set up exactly how the Falcons kind of wanted it. And I don't think their quarterback was able to take advantage. He missed some throws. You had a couple of drops, right? You left some big plays on the field. You did have a great game by Drake London. We'll talk about that more later, but you were able to survive the offensive line injuries, right? You went into this game with Dahlman and McGarry missing the game, 2 starters. Jake Matthews basically exited the game on the second series, I think, with a knee injury. And it sounds like, based off of the post-game comments from Arthur Smith, that isn't serious, but obviously we'll get an update on that tomorrow officially. Chris Lindstrom missed, I think, a series with an ankle injury, but he did come back in the game as well. So he didn't miss too much time, but you kind of had to survive for most of this game with Tyler Vrabel at left tackle, Ryan Newsel at center, and Storm Norton at right tackle. And to those guys' credit, and we'll see what the film says, but at least watching the game initially, they did their jobs from the best I could tell. So to me, this game was set up where Desmond Ridder could kind of change the narrative, and he didn't really change the narrative. Now, I had someone on the Locked On Falcons Insiders sort of ask me, like, if Ridder has the big game that, I was sitting here talking about him potentially having, would that give him the respect that from national folks? And I told that person that, Ridder's always going to be polarizing for a bunch of reasons, just like all quarterbacks are polarizing. It's not specific to Desmond Ridder. It's all quarterbacks. But, my follow-up to that person would be, you shouldn't care too much about Ridder getting national respect. There's only 2 opinions that you guys should care about. when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons and their players. It's your opinion and my opinion. Now, I say my opinion not out of arrogance, but the fact that you're sitting here listening or watching me talk means that you do care about my opinion. So I'm going to mention my opinion, but whether some random person on Fox Sports or ESPN likes Desmond Ridder should be inconsequential to you. If you like Desmond Ridder and if I like Desmond Ridder, that's the only two opinions you should care about. But that's neither here nor there. So, it felt like this game was there for the taking for Desmond Ridder and it kind of slipped through his fingers. Right. And we've seen him play well against the Bucs. That's part of the reason why I was optimistic and hopeful. Because you go back to that week 18 game last year against the Bucs, you go back to the week 7 game against the Bucs. That was arguably his second best game of the year. And the week 18 game in 2022 was his best game of the year. So it's like 2 out of Ridder's 3 best games in his first 14 starts came against the Bucs. And so you're like, okay, it's there, right? It's there for the taking. And it slipped through his fingers. And so while I'm not going to sit here and say it's done, Desmond Ridder's done here in Atlanta, I'll just admit that for me personally, your mileage may vary. I'm kind of at a point where there's no point for me, at least, to really be buying in at this point in time. Now, he could absolutely ball out over these last 4 games, and we'll have to reassess everything I've just said over the last 5 minutes of this podcast. But, and I certainly don't know exactly what I'll be talking about 2 weeks from now, because, I can only control what I can control, and I take it a day at a time on this podcast. But my mindset is basically, I'm not expecting Desmond Ridder. This game was, to me, this was his golden opportunity to have a breakthrough game. And I don't think he's going to get another golden opportunity to have that sort of breakthrough game where we can sit there and say, okay, he turned a corner. He might have that it factor, right? To me, this game was set up to be kind of a playoff game for the Falcons, right? Where it was a must-win sort of scenario type of game. And it was kind of like better yet, it's a practice run for the playoffs, because obviously the Bucs are not a playoff caliber team, although they might wind up making the playoffs this year because of the division they play in. But if we were going to win this division, be the 4 seed, host a playoff team, presumably the second place team in the NFC East, right? This is part of the reason why I'm not upset with the Falcons, quote unquote, abandoning the run as other people may be. You're not going to run the ball 40 times and beat Dallas or Philadelphia. Is what I'm suspecting, right? Maybe, but I don't think that's going to be your formula for it. We're gonna play a low scoring, ball control type of game, and we're gonna beat one of those 2 teams. It's like, okay, good luck with that. I will say, going up against those 2 defenses, okay, you're not going to try to score points against us. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is you were probably going to need a game where your quarterback dropped back to throw 45 times if you were going to win a playoff game. And so this was your kind of practice run to see in a sort of critical moment, is your quarterback capable of doing that? Right. And again, kind of fell short. So that's kind of where I'm at with Desmond Ridder. Right. We'll see, what my opinion, if it changes after watching the film. But, I watched some of the quarterback prospects this past week. I watched quite a bit of JJ McCarthy out of Michigan and Jaden Daniels out of LSU. The sort of prohibitive favorites to be QB3 and QB4 in some order in this draft, after Drake May of North Carolina and Caleb Williams of USC as the QB1 and QB2 in some order, right? That's kind of the expectations right now. And I watched both of those guys, and I'll probably continue watching more quarterbacks, because I'm kind of at a point where I've been hopeful that Desmond Ridder would kind of solve the Falcons, quarterback problem. And I'm now at a point where I think it was like, okay, well, I don't know if he's going to be the guy. And I know some of you guys already came to that conclusion 2 months ago, but as I say, you may care about my opinion. I don't care about your opinion. Kidding, or am I? No, but I'll just say, I watch more film of the Falcons quarterback than anybody else. So I don't need to, your opinion is not going to change my opinion, is basically what I'm saying. But anyway, so I'm just kind of at a point where it's like, okay, now I'm looking for alternative options, because I don't know if Ridder's that guy, right? So maybe I'll feel better after watching the film, but we talked about not doing a referendum on Desmond Ridder until the end of the season. And, maybe it's the emotions talking. Maybe I'll feel differently, in 48 hours after I watch the All 22. But this game kind of feels like a referendum on Desmond Ridder. So we'll see how that holds up over the next 48 hours, and whether I come back and watch the film and feel better, right? I might come away and be like, you know what, he just missed 3. It was 3 bad throws, It's like, oh, well, maybe we'll see, but that's kind of where I'm at. So we'll wrap up today's episode talking about some of the positives, including Drake London's performance, the offensive line, Clark Phillips, etc. And we'll get into that to finish out today's rapid reaction Locked On Falcons. Now, first, I want to tell you about Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And now that basketball season is here, I can't help but be excited about Prize Picks' new feature, which is their specials league, where you combine different sports, different leagues, right? If you're, for example, if you bring up the app on Prize Picks right now for Sunday Night Football, you can combine Jalen Hurts and Micah Parsons on pass touchdowns and sacks, right? That's what the specials league is about. You can combine different sports, different projections, same league, different leagues, all that stuff and more. So if you have the skills, you can find a way to turn $10 into $250 with Prize Picks. Just pick 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and it's just you versus the projections, not you versus anybody else. And the more entries you make, the more money you can make, up to 25 times your money. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selection of players and stat types is why Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code in lowercase LOCKEDONNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. So as I mentioned earlier, we do the Locked On Falcons Insiders. That's where you get access to the extended all 22 reviews. This past week, we did a full hour of, high definition video film breakdown, in addition to the regular all 22 review that, the rest of you non-insiders, you peasants, you commoners get. So if you want to be elevated in your thoughts on the Falcons, by all means, become an insider. Hit the link in the description below. It's at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. Not only do you get access to that extended all 22 review, you get that one-on-one feedback with me. So all day long, I've been going back and forth with the insiders, my riding that emotional roller coaster of being like, okay, they did this, or are they going to do it? All that stuff. So that's the beauty of being a Locked On Falcons Insider. And it's a 14-day free trial. And then after that, it's $4.99 a month. But, you can try it for 2 weeks and see it out. So join that in the link in the description below. But wrapping up today's episode, mentioned the offensive line stepping up, right? The depth stepped up. Now, we'll see what the film says. But, that's one of the positives from this game. Again, it wasn't all terrible, right? You look at this game, it's like the Falcons, we'll see if I think differently when I watch the film, but the Falcons outplayed the Bucs. If you ask it, again, that's what's making it so frustrating, that they just blew the opportunities and they had to win the game. But when it comes to the offensive line, we had a major concern coming out of training camp. Oh, the depth on this offensive line is bad, right? We joked about this. I was like, pray for, when you lay down your head at night and you're doing your prayers, pray for the ligaments and joints of all 5 starters of the Falcons offensive line, because they are incredibly thin, and maybe they're not as thin as we thought they were based off of today's performance. So, shout out to Dwayne Ledford if that holds up watching the film. And, probably the big takeaway from the game, the biggest positive was, was this the best Drake London game ever? Right? 10 catches, 172 yards on 11 targets. And that 11th target, I think, was a drop/pass breakup by Kayvon Merriweather, where London had the catch on like a 20, I think the broadcast said it was like a 26-yard gain, and Merriweather kind of knocked it out at the last second as Ridder was going. Ridder, why do I keep saying Ridder? London was going to the ground. So London nearly had a 200-yard game, is basically all that to say. So, it's funny because on Saturday, talking with the Locked On Falcons Discord, link in the description below, if you want to join that and talk about some of these things. Someone asked me, do I think London is a #1 receiver? And I was kind of like, borderline #1, #2. And so, of course, he had this type of game. And so I was like, okay, maybe I was too low on him. And another player, maybe I was too low on, is Clark Phillips, right? He had a pretty solid game. He got to start opposite AJ Terrell in Jeff Okudah's absence in this game, and played pretty well, right? Made some mistakes, but, some rookie mistakes, some technical issues. But for the most part, held up pretty well against Chris Godwin. Like, Chris Godwin had some opportunities, and Godwin dropped a bunch of those opportunities. But, Clark Phillips did his darndest, to be in Godwin's hip pocket all game long. So credit goes to Clark Phillips, because if you had asked me going into the Sunday, I would have been like, I don't think that's going to happen. So, yeah, kudos to Clark Phillips for stepping up. Kudos for AJ Terrell for stepping up. Mike Evans was a non-factor in this game. He had one catch for 8 yards on like 6 targets or something like that. And that one catch came, in midway through the third quarter on like a blown coverage where he kind of found a soft spot in the Falcons zone underneath, and I think converted a third down or something like that. So other than that, he was pretty much locked down. Now, some of that is on the quarterback missing throws. Shout out to Baker Mayfield, who was doing his best, despite, to be the second best quarterback in this game, despite Desmond Ridder doing his best. It was a race to basically, between those two guys, at least sort of my initial opinion was. But a lot of the depth that we needed to kind of step up kind of did, right? Andre Smith stepped in for an injured Nate Landman, and from my eyes, wasn't a disaster, right? Nearly had to play the game with that near, fumble forced at the end of the game, potentially. So, some positives from this game, I would say, and my suspicion is when I watched the film on Tuesday, the All 22, like I'll probably just come away being like, yeah, man, the Falcons outplayed the Bucs, and the 5 plays, the 5 blown opportunities, missed kick, a missed throw here or there, that red zone play, a missed deep shot to Scotty Miller, etc. And like I feel like that's going to be what I come away with on Tuesday, feeling like that that handful of plays that the Falcons did not take advantage of was the difference in the outcome of this game. So it's frustrating. I know it's been frustrating all year long to watch this team get all these opportunities and squander nearly all of them. And they did so once again this past Sunday. And so I'm just kind of at a point where it's like, we've been talking for the last 3 weeks about them turning a corner. And I felt like they tried to turn the corner and they ran into a stop sign and they knocked themselves out. That's what it feels like to me. And again, maybe I'll feel differently in a couple of days. Maybe they'll get it together and, still finish the season strong, win 3 out of the last 4, or run the table and win 4. And we're sitting here with the most lackluster 9 or 10 win season ever in the history of Falcon sports, which seems inevitable at this point in time. And, I sit here and I say, even though I might be, I don't know if I'm completely out on Desmond Ridder, but I'm basically like shopping. That's basically what I'm like. I got my old beat up clunker of a car, right? And it still gets me, where I need to go. But, I'm going to take some test drives. This is basically where I'm at with the Falcons quarterback situation. But we'll just sort of see if, he could take care of business moving forward. So that's kind of where I'm at, guys. I lost my train of thought. There was a point I was going to build to, and I forgot what it is. And I'll remember the minute I'm done recording this episode. But basically, we'll sort of see. They no longer have the benefit of the doubt for me, and Ridder no longer has the benefit of the doubt for me. So that's it. I appreciate all you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I hope you enjoy, whatever football, you check it out the rest of the night, tomorrow, whatever. Hope you have a great holidays. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, all that and more. Yeah. I gotta think, what else? Do I have anything else to say? No, I don't think I have anything else to say. So we'll be back with more tomorrow on the pod. We'll see if I can scrounge up a guest. I always forget, like every weekend I go into the weekend thinking, I need to hit up somebody to be the guest on the show, and I always forget. Everybody's waiting for the weekend. But anyway, that's it, guys. Check out Locked On Sports Today streaming channel, Locked On Sports Atlanta streaming channel. Become a Locked On Falcons Insider. Join the Discord. Both links in the description below. Continue to make us your first listen each and every day. Enjoy the holiday season. Take your mind off the Falcons. And that's it. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.